An Apache woman collapses. Her son's shocking cry for mom reveals an unexpected act of kindness. Mia stood behind the counter at the diner, arms loaded with steaming plates of food. The air was thick with the aroma of greasy burgers and coffee, the chatter of regulars providing a familiar backdrop. In her late 30s, she wore her exhaustion like a badge, each day blending into the next as she fought to keep her small family afloat. Bills piled up at home, and her children, Eli and his sister, depended on her strength, yet it felt as if the weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders. On this hectic afternoon, with the clock ticking loud and customer calls blending into a cacophony, Mia struggled to balance her responsibilities. Tension coiled in her stomach. With each order she juggled, the nagging thought of her financial woes gnawed at her. What if she couldn't pay the rent this month? What if her kids went hungry? As sweat trickled down her back, she pushed the fear deep down, pretending instead that she had it all under control. Yet beneath the bravado, doubt swirled, a vicious cycle of worry and resolve. Would it ever get easier? The sharp edges of anxiety and fatigue cut deep, and at that moment she wished for a respite, a glimmer of hope. With her youngest Eli in view, she fought to muster a smile. He deserved better than this grind. Amidst the chaos, something shifted. Mia's vision blurred, and she felt her legs weaken. Not here, not now, she thought, panic mingling with exhaustion as her body betrayed her. She collapsed on the diner floor, surrounded by indifferent linoleum and startled patrons. Silence invaded the bustling diner, and her breath came in shaky gasps as shadows loomed over her. "Mom!" His voice sliced through the uncertainty like a hot knife. Eli leaped from his seat, panic igniting every sense in his body, the world around him spinning. He couldn't let this be it. As Joe rushed to her side, Mia's figure grew small against the backdrop of anxious faces. The words from the folks present about how hard life can be were hanging in the air, suffocating in their familiarity. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days passed in a haze, and Mia awoke in a hospital room filled with colorful bouquets. Eli sat by her side, his small frame poised, a flicker of something fierce in his eyes. He studied the faces of the community members lingering outside, the kindness of strangers overwhelming yet humbling. A fire ignited within him, a determination to confront the injustices around him. It was time to rise above, to honor his mother's sacrifices with every step he took. But as he dove into his studies for an impending competition, a deeper truth emerged. Inequalities simmered within their small town, realities stark and glaring. The shadows of their financial struggles loomed large. Each revelation reeked of a fiery urgency, demanding not just academic prowess but advocacy. In that moment, the weight of his family legacy became a pivotal question. Was he ready to be a voice for those unseen? Eli stepped onto the stage at the competition, his heart drumming with conflicting emotions, fear, anger, yet a glimmer of hope. Before him lay not just his future, but a chance to speak for the silent, those overlooked just like his mother. Would he dare reveal their struggles? The audience waited, breath held, the tension thick as a storm brewing in the desert sky. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the echoes of doubt hold him prisoner once more? Eli's breath hitched as he stood before the microphone, the spotlight casting a harsh light on his anxious frame. He glanced at the audience, faces blurred by his rising pulse. The weight of expectation pressed against him, each heartbeat echoing the urgency of his thoughts. This was more than just a competition. This was a moment that could define who he was meant to become. He opened his mouth, the first syllable sticking as if caught in his throat like a stubborn lump. The urge to retreat, to abandon the stage, nagged at him insidiously. He thought of his mother lying in that hospital bed, the shadows under her eyes, each a reminder of the struggle she faced daily. Overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, doubt curled into a tight knot in his stomach. I want to talk about the realities we face, Eli began hesitantly, his voice wobbly but clear. He took a deep breath, forcing the fear away like the morning sun dispersing the darkness. Many of us operate under the surface of society, like my mom, who works tirelessly just to keep our family afloat. The honesty flowed, fueled by vulnerability and anger, igniting him further. Suddenly, the words came easier. He spoke of their hidden burdens, the persistence of economic hardship, and the inadequacies that gnawed at their lives every day. Each phrase transformed the initial tremors of fear into a buoy of strength. Eli saw heads nodding, faces shifting from indifference to engagement. Encouraged, he leaned into his narrative, weaving threads of his mother's strength with anecdotes of others who fought silent battles. As he delved deeper, a revelation struck him like a thunderclap. The responsibility to not just share their story, but to advocate for the voiceless surged from within. The crowd hung on his words, silence stretching taut around the venue, hanging on every syllable that spoke of resilience and hope. Yet as he looked over the audience, a flicker of doubt sparked anew. Was he truly equipped to tackle the deeper issues? Eli remembered his mother's exhaustion and the sacrifices she made. He craved to validate their struggles, but would he be misunderstood? Would they see him as just another boy whining about his problems? In that pivotal moment, he made a decision. Instead of wavering, he chose to draw strength from fear. He would wear his vulnerability like armor rather than a shackle. "The truth is," he declared, a fierce determination glimmering in his eyes, "we are not defined by our circumstances, we are defined by our choices." The revelation felt electric, illuminating paths within his consciousness that he had yet to explore. As he finished, the audience's applause washed over him like a wave, reassuring him that he had done more than simply perform. He had taken the first step into a realm far beyond his own fears, embracing the voice he could become. Stepping off the stage, Eli was met with a flurry of emotions, pride filling the gaps where doubt had once thrived. But as he sought out his mother's eyes, he caught a lingering uncertainty within himself. Would this newfound confidence translate into tangible action? Would he confront the systemic issues deeply embedded in their lives? As Eli left the stage, the echo of applause faded, but the question remained, looming large. What was his next move in a world structured against them? The path of advocacy unfurled before him like a jagged road waiting to be traversed. And as he stepped into the future, he realized the true test had just begun. Eli's heart raced as he stepped into the cool evening air, the weight of the auditorium fading behind him, yet still clinging to his skin, heavy with expectation. An electric current of adrenaline coursed through his veins, awakening a sense of purpose he had never fully recognized. He walked with his head slightly bowed, mulling over the sequence of events, the highs of his speech battling the unexpected apprehension that now settled in his gut. He found himself in the dimly lit parking lot, surrounded by the buzzing noise of talking heads and exiting crowds. As he approached his mother's car, parked under the flickering streetlight, a troubling thought began to spiral within him. Had he truly said enough? His words were meant to spark awareness, but with such weight comes responsibility. It dawned on him that speaking was only the first step. Activism required action, the kind that demanded a relentless pursuit of truth, advocacy for those unheard, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable realities. As Eli slid into the passenger seat, he turned to look at his mother. Her weary frame showed the signs of exhaustion, but her eyes sparkled with unyielding pride, a reflection of their shared struggles. That pride ignited another flicker of doubt within him. Would she understand the weight of his ambition? Would she support an uncertain path that involved voices louder than his own? "Mom," he began, words spilling out before he could filter them. "I think I want to do more, share not just our story but create change, challenge the things that keep people stuck." His mother's gaze softened, and for a moment, Eli thought he saw concern mixed with approval. "You've always had a voice, Eli, but voices alone cannot change much. You need to know where to direct them." Her words hung in the air, a challenge masked as encouragement. Eli could feel the pressure of clarity pressing down upon him. He didn't want to be just a face representing the struggle. He wanted to be the catalyst for actionable change. "Haven't you always taught me that change starts small?" he replied, his voice gathering strength. What he hadn't anticipated was the growing resolve within him. Discussing broader issues could become a doorway to understanding, not only for him, but for those who lived his narrative. The drive home felt different. Each mile marker was imbued with intention, propelling him into contemplation over how he would approach this new phase of discovery. He noticed the small details of their neighborhood more acutely, the neglected parks, the shuttered businesses, each a silent testament to the systemic problems that gripped their community's throat. Once home, the air buzzed with possibility as the glow of the setting sun streaked through the windows, illuminating faded family pictures lining the walls. Eli pondered the faces in those photographs, aware now that each person's story existed within a greater narrative that merited more than passive glorification. Would he have the courage to elevate their stories beyond nostalgia and into the realm of advocacy? His mother moved around the kitchen, her presence grounding him. With determination swelling in his chest, Eli grabbed a notebook and began to scribble ideas. He wanted to gather information, connect with professionals, and initiate productive conversations. The thrill of planning invigorated him. Suddenly, a stirring memory flashed. A phrase spoken from the podium echoed in his mind. "We are defined by our choices." Eli realized that the specifics mattered. The choices he made now could carve out not only his future, but also the futures of those entwined in their shared struggles. As he drafted a list of possible actions, a sense of urgency gripped him. There was too much to lose, too many voices left unheard. With the ink still wet on the page, Eli paused. What was the first conversation he needed to have? The memories of his mother's hardships flickered in his mind, a reminder that the time had come to face not just his fears, but the systems in place that enabled suffering to persist. Tomorrow he would reach out, seek advice, and begin building connections that could amplify the voices of the overlooked. He understood now that understanding and awareness would only lead to action if he was courageous enough to take the first step. As the night deepened around him, Eli felt the fire of ambition ignite. But would his newfound clarity suffice to break through entrenched barriers? The extent of his determination would be tested, and the answers awaited him in the uncertain dawn. Eli awoke the next morning. The early light streaming through his bedroom window felt like a personal spotlight on his ambitions. He blinked away sleep, but the weight of his resolve lingered. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when he reached for his notebook, fingers trembling slightly as he traced over his ideas from the night before. Each word filled him with growing certainty, pushing him toward the edge of the unknown. After breakfast, he felt the urgency coursing through him like caffeine, propelling him to grab his phone and type a message to a community leader he had admired from afar. Would they respond to his plea for guidance? Did he even have the right to seek their time? Doubts crept in, but he pushed them back. He was ready to leap, uncertain yet determined. His thumb hovered over the send button. With a quick breath, he pressed it, an act symbolizing a shift from contemplation to action. Moments later, a reply popped up. "Let's meet. Your passion is important." The words felt like a small victory, a rallying cry that elevated his spirits and flared his motivation. The first step had been taken. As he prepared, Eli reflected on what he wanted to achieve and, more crucially, what it meant to be an advocate for change. He understood that knowledge wasn't enough. He needed to embody the responsibility he had declared. He donned his favorite shirt, simple but professional, and headed out, the excitement tingling in his fingertips. The community center stood a few blocks away, a place filled with action and voices unified by purpose. But today, Eli was focused on finding clarity within the chaos. As he entered, he was hit with a rush of warmth, mingling with laughter, conversations, and the bustle of people moving purposefully. Each interaction inside felt packed with significance. A reminder that change often started in small, intimate spaces. Eli was led to a room buzzing with energy, a table full of familiar faces. The community leader greeted him with a genuine smile that eased his nerves. They exchanged pleasantries but soon plunged into the heart of the discussion. Eli shared his vision, recounting his personal journey while painting a vivid picture of why he sought change. Questions flowed from the leader. What action would he take? Who would he involve? Eli's thoughts raced as they dissected each point, sparking debates within himself. The leader emphasized that understanding the systemic barriers was vital. Feeling the emotions of those caught within them was indispensable. It was clear to Eli that his experience was not isolated. It was a part of deeper societal issues that demanded a multifaceted strategy. As they spoke, appreciation for the weight of each action began to settle like a revelation in Eli's mind. He recognized that every voice, his, the leaders, and those he sought to represent, carried a burden to tell stories that begged to be heard. After hours of engaging discussion, Eli left the center feeling swollen with purpose. His adrenaline surged as he walked back home, the familiar streets taking on a renewed significance. But with that exhilaration came the creeping shadow of uncertainty, the fear of failure gnawing at the edges of his excitement. What if his ideas were naive? What if he lost sight of his path amidst the complexities of advocacy? He reached for his notebook again, flipping through pages of notes and ideas while contemplating the next steps. How might he turn this burgeoning momentum into something palpable for his community? Eli yearned for practical action. His phone buzzed again, a message from another friend hinting at an upcoming meeting. Intrigued, he opened it to reveal an opportunity that could set his proposed plans in motion, tying his personal story directly to grassroots efforts. But what was he willing to risk to make it happen? The stakes rattled him. It was one thing to speak of change, but now, as he prepared for the impending meeting, the criticism, the skepticism, and the harsh realities of activism loomed large. As determination set a glowing fire in his core, Eli understood this was just the beginning. Actions would test not only his resolve but the depth of his empathy and strength of character. Tomorrow he must face not only the ideas but the resistance that change inevitably attracted. Would he possess what it takes to navigate the turbulence ahead? Eli found himself surrounded by flickering images in his mind, visions of everything he had previously abandoned, and yet everything he deeply desired. The ink had barely dried on the pages of his notebook before he began to transform that ink into an actionable plan. Sometimes, the urgent impulse to make change clashed violently with the chaotic swirl of uncertainty. As he scrolled through his phone, Eli's pulse quickened. He had organized a meeting with the Grassroots Initiative, a group dedicated to addressing the very challenges he wished to confront. A voice inside him whispered that this was his opportunity. He would be surrounded by people who believed in action. Still, doubt slithered like smoke through his thoughts. What if they were experts? What if they scrutinized his every insight? Eli fought back against the rising tide of anxiety. Instead of allowing fear to overshadow his motivations, he decided to dive deeper into research that evening. He gathered statistics, compiled personal stories, and outlined his case. The more he honed his narrative, the clearer it became that he not only wanted to be a catalyst for change, but also needed to support others who felt voiceless. He delved into the intricacies of advocacy, laws, regulations, and the systemic flaws plaguing his community. The fire inside him intensified as he connected the dots, invigorating him with a sense of clarity amidst the chaos. That night, he lay awake, tossing and turning, his mind racing. Monologues played out, rehearsals for what he hoped would be impactful conversations at the meeting the next day. Uncertainty loomed about whether his passion could translate into progress, weighing heavily on his heart. It felt as if possibilities were laced with hesitations. His aspirations danced tantalizingly close, yet remained out of reach. Finally, sunrise broke, spilling its golden light over his anxious frame. He pushed against his discomfort while prepping. The urgency, or perhaps the dread, of what lay ahead resonated deeply within him. It was essential to remind himself that influence often emerges from vulnerability. He wanted to confront his fears openly, if only to find his true voice amongst those who shared his uncertainties. When he entered the meeting room the next day, the atmosphere thrummed with hope and purpose. His heart raced as he scanned the faces looking back at him, each echoing their own journeys of struggle and triumph. As the discussions began, he welcomed the tension in the air, knowing that this was where transformation could occur. Eli recalled the advice from the community leader. There was a hidden strength within storytelling. Each time a participant articulated their experiences, Eli made mental notes of the layers of emotions they unveiled. Their honesty inspired him, fueling his resolve to embrace authenticity. In a moment of boldness, he chose to share his own story, weaving vulnerability into the fabric of the dialogue, revealing how the struggle for change often started long before action was taken. As the meeting progressed, he proposed methodologies based on both what he had learned and the experiences shared by others, ideas that danced between idealism and realism. The reception was mixed but insightful. Some embraced his vision, urging him to refine and distill his ideas further. Others were more skeptical, essentially reflecting doubts he himself harbored. It was difficult facing resistance from within a community that he admired. After the meeting concluded, Eli stepped out, feeling both elevated and drained. The surge of adrenaline filled him with hope, but questions began to swirl like leaves caught in a storm. Had he exposed too much? Did he risk being criticized? As he walked away, he burned with a realization. Advocacy was as much about dealing with personal insecurities as it was about addressing societal challenges. His notebook, filled with scribbles of hope and strategy, felt heavier in his bag, now holding the weight of expectation. Would he continue to step into the unknown, allowing others the space to voice their struggles? The flame of self-doubt flickered, but beneath it, a rebellious spark ignited. What he hadn't anticipated was how the next encounter would radically transform him, testing not only his capacity for resilience, but also the limits of his determination and empathy. Tomorrow awaited him with unanswered questions, and he could hardly contain the apprehension climbing within him. Would he rise to the occasion, or falter in the face of profound, raw truths? Eli found himself wrestling with the shadows of his fears as he prepared for the next opportunity that loomed on the horizon. His heartbeat was a cacophony echoing in his ears, amplifying each thought and amplifying his uncertainties. Today would be different. He could feel it in the air, charged with tension and promise. Yet how to navigate the labyrinth of expectations weighed down on him like an anchor. He stood outside the community center, taking deep breaths as he practiced his introduction in his mind. Just as he felt the grip of anxiety tighten, he heard the clamor of laughter and conversation spilling from within. The sound felt simultaneously alien and inviting, a beacon for the daring and the restless. He brushed his palms against his jeans, grounding himself before stepping inside. The room was a whirlwind of motion. People bustled around, exchanging ideas and building connections that Eli yearned for but couldn't quite grasp. He could see familiar faces from the previous meeting, nodding in enthusiastic discussion. As he noticed their camaraderie, the gnawing discomfort returned, and Eli questioned his place among them. Could he genuinely contribute? Did he belong in a space brimming with seasoned advocates? Yet he recalled the glimmer of resolve he felt after sharing his story. Perhaps vulnerability could bridge the chasm of insecurity. Eli aligned himself on the periphery, absorbing snippets of conversation while his mind churned with possibilities, waiting for the right moment to leap into the fray. Then he saw her, Maria, a fiery advocate he admired for her uncompromising demeanor. She was in the midst of a conversation about local policies that stifled the very voices Eli sought to uplift. As he caught her eye, a flicker of recognition sparked. This was it. His moment to engage, to carve his space in a room filled with potential. "Welcome, Eli. It's great to see you again," she exclaimed, her voice laced with warmth, halting his spiraling thoughts. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward, suddenly aware that every word weighed heavily on his shoulders. "Maria, I've been thinking a lot about the policies affecting our community. I believe we can actually propose concrete changes." His own voice surprised him. It was steadier than expected, laced with an energy that sought to connect rather than compete. Maria's brow furrowed, an intent look crossing her features. "That's a start. What are your thoughts on framing this within the historical context of community struggles?" As Eli floundered momentarily in the deep waters of her inquiry, he felt the adrenaline rush through him, igniting his passion once more. He articulated his ideas, referencing the research he'd done. The more he spoke, the more the familiar rush of confidence intertwined with the remnants of doubt. Their discussion deepened, evolving into a dynamic exchange that melded his insights with her perspective. When their dialogue drew the attention of others, Eli felt a surge of exhilaration. People began to join, asking questions and offering their reflections. He could feel the burden of his insecurities melting away as he shared experiences, each revelation solidifying his presence among them. The space transformed from a daunting arena of experts into a collaborative think tank. Yet, just as he reveled in this empowering moment, a familiar weight settled in the pit of his stomach. The realization hit him. A profound moral dilemma was unfolding. Advocacy was about more than sharing his voice. It demanded intimacy and the willingness to share others' pain. Could he genuinely represent those who needed to be heard while grappling with his hesitations? As the room pulsated with ideas and aspirations, Eli couldn't ignore the reality that growing as a leader meant confronting his limitations directly. The moment felt ripe for a deeper exploration of his motivations. Did he truly want to uplift others? Or was he chasing a validation that stemmed from his own insecurities? The conversation eventually waned, leaving Eli at a crossroads. He stood at the edge of this new reality, not quite knowing how far he was willing to dive into the depths of vulnerability and conviction. He suddenly felt both exhilarated and terrified. What had started as a moment of connection had evolved into an introspective inquiry that he could hardly fathom. The implications of his choices and the growing relationships weighed heavily on his heart. With a flickering commitment stirring deep within him, Eli understood that the next decision he faced would not be solely for himself. It would ripple into the lives of those around him. He felt the tension rising again, coiling around his determination. The encounter was pushing him towards a precipice of understanding himself and the world he wanted to change. Little did he know that this was just the beginning of unearthing the deepest layers of his capability. Eli sensed the stirring winds of change gather strength, ushering him toward a confrontation that would strip away the safety of his assumptions and plunge him into an unknown future. What he didn't realize was that in this journey of pushing boundaries, he would soon be forced to face the narratives buried in his own past, ready to either define or shatter his quest for advocacy. Eli emerged from the vibrant chaos of conversation with Maria still resonating in his mind. He had crossed an invisible threshold, one where doubt had momentarily retreated, only to be replaced by an echoing emptiness. As the discussions faded around him, he pondered the implications of what it meant to be a genuine advocate, a voice for the voiceless, he thought. Who exactly was he representing? The question gnawed at him. While people laughed and moved around, energy buzzing like electricity, Eli ventured deeper into contemplation. Each interaction stretched his understanding of himself even further. Maria's challenge had ignited not just excitement, but doubt about his core intentions. His path towards vocal advocacy began to resemble a labyrinth fraught with dark corners, unknowns, and whispers of discomfort swirling in the still air. The next day, Eli woke early, the haunting shadows of uncertainty casting themselves across the pages of his journal. He believed writing could serve as a mirror reflecting the layers of confusion and aspiration intertwining within him. He crafted an entry laced with frustration and burgeoning determination, spelling out the tangled thoughts that had overtaken him the night before. The questions unfolded as he asked himself why he was drawn to advocacy in the first place. Was it altruism or an eager grasp for personal validation? Each phrase clawed at the fabric of his motivations, unraveling yet again the complexity of his desires. After breakfast, Eli decided to take a walk, letting the fresh air wash over his troubled thoughts. As he strolled through the neighborhood, a path he had often taken for granted, he noticed graffiti covering a nearby wall. The artists had painted vibrant portraits of local figures, their expressions filled with passion and resilience. It struck him like a thunderbolt. Each mural represented a narrative, stories held within the frames of those faces, lives intertwined in a shared struggle. Eli paused, his breath caught in his throat. He felt a deep urge to capture these stories, to amplify those voices lost amid societal noise. It was then he realized that storytelling might be his key to becoming a true advocate. It wasn't about talking over people or asserting his own narrative. It was about creating space for others, honoring their experiences. Returning home, Eli found himself lost in ideas. He envisioned a project, a compilation of stories from local community members, each contributing to a larger tapestry that painted the reality of their lives. It felt monumental, yet intimately human. What better way to address the policies he and Maria had discussed than to illustrate the lives they impacted? This could be the connective tissue that would bolster his passion in advocacy. But as he drafted notes, excitement morphed into anxiety. How would he approach this? What if others felt he was overstepping a boundary that was theirs to hold? Doubt clawed back into focus, and he reminded himself of the fragility of trust that came with sharing one's story. Moreover, would the community even welcome him as a collector of stories? He had not paid his dues in the same way they had. That thought lingered like a ghost, yet the fire of possibility urged him to push through the fear. Exercising vulnerability with an intent to listen could be the bridge he needed to connect more deeply with those around him. Eli's heart raced as he formulated a plan. Perhaps he could attend local meetings, open forums, the very spaces where voices congregated. He wasn't merely floating in the periphery anymore. He was building the scaffolding of collaboration and authenticity. Just as he lost himself in this newfound vision, a shadow flickered in his mind. Memories of his own challenges, the voices that had shaped him. Suddenly, Eli understood. He must confront those experiences if he expected to guide others in healing their own wounds. This acknowledgement stirred something profound within him, inciting both trepidation and resolve. Eli stood at a metaphorical crossroads, gazing into the unknown future. He realized now that he would not only be advocating for others, but also for a fragment of himself that he had long avoided. He resolved to engage not just with the external world, but to dig deep within. The next time he opened his mouth to speak for others, he must first be willing to share his own story. The culmination of these revelations brought forth a growing surge of urgency. It was time to put his plan in motion. But little did he know, as he prepared for the leap, an unexpected encounter was lurking just around the corner, one that would challenge his resolve and push him to the limits of his understanding. The path to advocacy was becoming a tumultuous journey, the weight of discovery pressing down on him with each step forward. What awaited him could either consolidate his newfound purpose or threaten to engulf him in the shadows he had only just begun to face. Eli barely slept the night after finalizing his plan. Questions buzzed relentlessly in his mind. How would he start? Would the community be open to sharing their stories with someone they barely knew? Would he be able to navigate the delicate balance between borrowing their narratives to advocate authentically and ensuring he honored their truths? As dawn broke, Eli felt the weight of his mission pressing on his shoulders, but every nerve in his body pulsed with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. He knew he needed to scaffold a foundation for his project. Researching local gatherings became his first step. The snaking lines of events delved deeper into the heart of a community he felt both drawn to and disconnected from. Eli meticulously noted the timing of meetings, observing the ebb and flow of community involvement, fascinated yet daunted. The rawness of struggle and triumph echoed through his findings, and while his mind thrummed with excitement, doubt gnawed at him like a relentless specter. As he prepared to attend his first meeting, Eli meticulously curated his notes, pondering the best way to introduce himself. He envisioned a room alive with voices, each person a storyteller waiting for their moment to shine. However, when he arrived, the surroundings felt unfamiliar, a stark contrast to his prior daydreams. Participants milled about, engaged in their discussions, laughter ricocheting off the walls. Eli's heartbeat quickened, and he hesitated at the threshold. Was he truly prepared to dive into unknown waters? Mustering courage, he stepped inside, presenting himself as an eager listener rather than a voice demanding attention. A simple, "Hi, I'm Eli," carried the weight of his desire to connect. As the conversation flowed, he listened intently, offering encouragement when needed, but often remaining silent, allowing others to fill the space with their rich experiences. Several voices lingered in his mind as he spoke with one woman, Clara, who spoke of her family's struggles to stay connected amidst their demanding work schedules. Eli found himself drawn to her narrative, hungering to understand the nuances that dictated her perspective. How fierce her loyalty was to her family, and how despair hovered silently behind her eyes. This connection felt like a seed being sown, but the challenge of truly defining his role as a storyteller loomed. At the meeting's end, Eli approached Clara, summoned by an impulse to ask if she'd be willing to share her story in his project. She looked at him skeptically, her gaze guarded. "Why should I tell you?" she asked, each word measured with an edge of protectiveness. The honesty hit him squarely in the chest, forcing Eli to confront his intentions. This woman didn't owe him a story. She was a fortress guarding her experiences. "Because your story matters," he replied, fortifying his voice with sincerity. "I want to show the world the reality behind all of this." Clara's silence enveloped them for a moment before she nodded. "Okay, but you better understand where I'm coming from." That simple exchange ignited a flicker of belief in Eli. He began to understand that his challenge was not just to collect stories, but to build a safe space where vulnerability could thrive, underpinned by respect and genuine connection. Each story would add to his understanding not only of the community, but of himself, peeling back layers of his own identity he had long ignored. Unbeknownst to Eli, while he had gained a small glimmer of acceptance, the atmosphere festered with complexity. A flicker of hostility surged from an unexpected voice in the meeting. A man, scarred by his experiences, erupted with skepticism about Eli's intentions. "You think a kid like you can understand what we go through? You're just an outsider playing at being a savior." The accusation struck a nerve, shattering Eli's burgeoning confidence. Standing there, feeling the weight of alienation in that moment, he grappled with doubt as it reared its head again. Yet he knew this confrontation would define him. The confrontation forced him to clarify his stance not just to others, but within his own psyche. The time had come to face the very fears that had kept him at bay, the fear of rejection, the fear of being perceived as a mere interloper. With every ounce of resolve he could muster, Eli clenched his fists and prepared to respond. Yet, he hadn't anticipated how this single challenge would ripple through his increasingly complex path. What awaited him next might either galvanize his purpose or sever the fragile tie he had begun to weave into the community. In that charged atmosphere, Eli stood on the precipice of discovery, teetering between potential acceptance and total rejection. Would he back down or rise to reclaim his narrative? Eli inhaled sharply, his throat tightening as the man's words reverberated in his mind. The accusation was not only a challenge, it was a reminder of the fragile thread on which his mission hung. A knot twisted in his stomach as he met the man's fierce glare. Eli could feel the room's energy shift, leaving an open wound of doubt and scrutiny laid bare for all to see. "Your perception of me doesn't have to define our conversation," Eli replied, voice steadying as he spoke. The words felt like a thin layer of armor, shielding him from the heavy judgment that sank around him. "The intent behind this project is rooted in respect, not to save, but to amplify your stories and share your truths." Eli's gaze swept across the room, observing shifting expressions, from disbelief to quiet contemplation. A ripple of camaraderie began to form, igniting in embers of recognition as others caught snippets of his sincerity. He could feel Clara's eyes upon him, each minute part of his delivery becoming a test of his resolve. Could he earn the trust of the very people he sought to represent, despite their fears? Moments stretched, the silence hanging like an impending storm. The man who had questioned him studied Eli closely, as if searching for a crack in the facade, and Eli squared his shoulders. "I'm here to learn from you, not to demand or dictate. I might be an outsider, but I want to listen, to understand where you stand." With every word, Eli felt strands of confidence weaving back into his voice, a reinforcement against the unease that had stalked him since he stepped through the door. He had been given a chance to confront doubt, to evolve in light of adversity, rather than retreat in fear. He was discovering that every confrontation could either break him or forge an unbreakable connection. Clearing his throat, Eli pressed on. "Our lives intersect in this narrative, and I believe there's power in allowing those stories to shine." He felt the tension in the room waver slightly. Awareness flickered behind the skeptical eyes listening around him. Slowly, but surely, the man softened, a flicker of interest breaking the walls of skepticism. "You've got guts, kid," he admitted, though the edge remained. "But don't mistake bravery for understanding. Walk the walk, and we'll see if you can earn that trust." Eli nodded, more aware than ever that this was just the cusp of his journey. He was not here to conquer, but to build, piece by piece, each story fortifying a fragile bridge. he found himself intrigued by the realization that storytelling was more than just narration. It was an act requiring immense courage from both sides. As the meeting wound down, Eli felt Clara's gaze. "You didn't back down," she remarked, a surprised inflection softening her tone. "Not many would stand their ground like that. It takes courage to confront fear." "Perhaps," Eli said, contemplating his evolving understanding, "but it also takes just as much courage to open up to someone new." Clara regarded him thoughtfully, the hesitance still lingering but beginning to dissipate. Unsure where this connection would lead, Eli sensed the seed of an alliance forming. The echoes of the room faded as people began filtering out, laughter and chatter slowly resuming, a vibrant energy that Eli realized he craved. For once, he felt less like an intruder, and more like part of something significant. Yet uncertainty loomed like a dark cloud, the man's threat still sharp in Eli's mind. "Remember, Eli," Clara said as she prepared to leave, "each story is a gift, but gifts come with responsibilities." The weight of her words pressed heavily upon him, awakening a new layer of commitment. Eli had not only to collect stories, but to safeguard them, honor their origins, and represent them with dignity. As he exited the building, an overwhelming sense of purpose washed over him. Yet a twin wave of anxiety crashed against it, the realization that the road ahead would demand everything he had. The fragile tie to the community hung in the balance, and he wondered, could he uphold that responsibility, or would the challenge of skepticism prove too great? The hum of the city enveloped him, and with it, a question loomed larger than ever. What would happen if he failed to honor their truths, risking the very connection he had worked so hard to forge? The path ahead felt treacherous, and the stakes had never been higher. Eli awoke the following morning, anticipation coursing through him like a wildfire. The adrenaline of the previous day had transformed his anxiety into sheer determination. He realized that he stood at the threshold of potential. An opportunity now lay before him to truly embody the advocate he aspired to be. His resolve crystallized into purpose as he prepared for what was arguably the most pivotal moment of his journey. The first community storytelling event. He would invite local residents to share their narratives, painstaking, vivid stories that could pulse with both truth and resilience. The venue buzzing with creative energy filled him with exhilaration and unease. The weight of responsibility was immense. Failure was no longer an option. Eli arrived early, feeling the atmosphere thrum with possibility. His heart raced as he set up chairs and arranged a small stage where storytellers would stand under a dim spotlight, shedding light on their intricate, often painful realities. This event would symbolize not just a collection of stories, but a seminal moment of solidarity, bridging gaps between voices long ignored. As attendees began to trickle in, he kept a mental checklist of everything he needed to ensure the gathering felt safe and inviting. Faces lined the walls, each marking their own struggles with hope-filled smiles, whispering affirmations that this event was worth the risk. However, doubts crept in as familiar voices seeped into his mind. Could he truly honor their stories? Would it be too overwhelming for those who shared deeply personal experiences? Eli wrestled with his insecurities until the sound of Clara's voice broke him from his spiral of uncertainty. "Eli," she said gently as she approached, "you have the power to frame our struggles beautifully. Just remember, every story is a thread in the fabric of our community." Her encouragement grounded him, igniting a fire of belief and fortifying his confidence. The room began to fill, curiosity and tenderness mingling in the air. Eli's pulse quickened as he stood before the crowd, heart thumping in anticipation, and he embraced the moment fully. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady and clear. "This gathering is not merely an event. It is a celebration of us, a testament to the strength we embody together. Each of you has a voice that deserves to be heard." As the first storyteller stepped onto the stage, Eli felt a palpable surge of energy ripple through the room. Clara shared her journey, speaking candidly about her struggles, the hardships of working 2 shifts, the pressures of motherhood, and how the community's neglect often left her feeling invisible. Every word she uttered echoed in the hearts of those listening, offering connections through shared pain. With each story that followed, Eli saw lives unfold before him, histories of love, loss, tenacity, and hope. The audience became engaged, nodding in understanding, amplifying emotions resonating within them. The barriers of skepticism crumbled with every shared experience, creating a resonance of solidarity that filled the air with cherished possibilities. What Eli hadn't anticipated was how deeply his own journey intertwined with those of the storytellers. They were not just illuminating the shadows of their truth, they were shining a light on the work he still had to do for himself. The narratives touched the raw edges of his past struggles, entwining with those he sought to lift up. At the end of the storytelling, Eli felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. As applause erupted, a wave of recognition washed over him, washing away residue of doubt. Clara smiled at him from the audience, a quiet nod of approval sparking within her eyes. He had taken the leap, welcoming vulnerability as an essential component of his advocacy. After the event, attendees mingled, creating new connections, revitalizing spirits, and sharing laughter. Eli saw Clara engaged in discussion with others, exchanging experiences with palpable enthusiasm. He glanced around, marveling at the transformed atmosphere. The seed he had planted had flourished beyond expectations. In that moment, he stood tall, radiating warmth and confidence, recognition of his role no longer an aspiration, but a reality. He had embraced the discomfort, learned to navigate the complexities of community storytelling, and began to unearth layers of responsibility previously unknown to him. As he left the venue, Eli reflected on the enormity of his journey thus far. The triumph of confronting skepticism, the joy of fostering connections, and the deep understanding of the power of sharing narratives filled him with purpose. He had not just emerged as an advocate, he had catalyzed a movement, a symphony of individual stories threading together into a larger tale of resilience. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he no longer viewed them as obstacles. They were stepping stones in his ongoing evolution. Eli had conquered his fears, transformed doubt into advocacy, and in doing so, had grounded himself firmly within the heart of his community. With a smile on his face and a renewed sense of belonging, he stepped into the future with confidence, ready to continue weaving a tapestry of stories, both his and those of others, proving to the world that every voice matters. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.